So the purpose of taking the steps that we're talking about in this module, building systems, processes, and people, is to set up an organizational framework that allows the endeavor to endure without you. While you may have been the visionary who brought this endeavor to life, it needs to be tightly managed as it grows. And the day-to-day running of the organization can't be handled by you alone. So when you first start, it might be that everyone's doing everything, right? And you're just like making up decisions as you go along and figuring it out as you go along. But at some point, it's time to professionalize and institutionalize. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to set up your endeavor so that it can grow beyond the founders and beyond the founding team. So we'll start by talking a little bit about operations. I've kind of mentioned this a lot, what operations is, but I don't think I ever stopped and defined it. So operations means the management of the different pieces of your value chain. It's the functioning of your social venture and the day-to-day activities and decisions that are required to get your desired outcomes. And in thinking about these day-to-day activities and decisions, one thing that's really helpful for you to do at some stage is process mapping. So process mapping means standardizing what are the decision points and what are the steps that need to be taken to deliver your offering. So I'll show you a couple of examples of process maps. The first one is for a community health clinic. And this basically just walks through the operations, administrations, and management of this community health clinic in terms of where the patient enters, who greets them when they enter, what information needs to be taken from them, and then where do they go wait, and for how long, and then who comes and gets them, and who's the first healthcare provider that sees them, et cetera, as they go all the way along the value chain and exit, and what are the desired outcomes, how do we follow up, etc. And you can make a process map like this by hand, using a simple word processor. It doesn't have to be that complicated. It's about getting together with your team and making sure that the institutional memory that you're holding in your heads is now on paper for others to follow, like a standard operating procedure. The second example is from an ag tech or agricultural technology incubator. And this is their process map for maintaining rural farmers' equipment to support their livelihoods. It was shared with me by a research intern of mine at the Yale School of Management. And it kind of walks through kind of like this customer service flowchart about how do you support these rural farmers. And so this is more like a visual diagram. And again, you can just create it using basic software. And there's also free online software for process mapping. So process mapping is really helpful to create your standardized operating procedures. And you might have multiple process maps for different phases of your work. For example, when I worked with Al-Fanad in Lebanon, the venture philanthropy organization I helped start, we had a process, we had like an investment cycle. How do we find our investees and conduct due diligence and support them, and what does that look like? We had a communication cycle, like what does our annual communication look like? When do we need to put information out? What are the deadlines? What are the key dates, etc.? We had like multiple different cycles that we put together so that different parts of the team would know what's expected of them and when, so that you don't have that constant startup feeling of like running around, putting out fires and making decisions at the last minute. There's like, this is the official way that we do things. So that's the purpose of process mapping. Now, there are a lot of other ways to standardize and professionalize your offering. So you'll also probably need to create policies and procedures. For example, at Al-Fanad, we had to create a child protection policy, an anti-terrorism policy. These are kind of like standard things you can find online. But you might want to think creatively about what matters to you and what are some policies that you want to create for your organization. What is your parental leave policy? How are you going to support members of your team who need to care for others? What is your other caregiver policy other than people having babies? What if they need to take care of parents or other loved ones? What is your mental health policy? What if someone on your team is not feeling well and needs to take care of themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are manuals where you put things down for an incoming person who's recruited to do a job. For example, human resources could be part of your policies and procedures, like the hiring and firing policies, diversity, equity, inclusion, etc. And then you could also have a human resource manual where like, okay, this is how we do things. This is the conversation we have if we're concerned about firing someone. This is the rights they're given, etc. So it's like the human resources person can take this and implement it. And then you could have technical manuals in terms of delivering your offerings. You can have all sorts of manuals. And the purpose of manuals is not to make your organization bureaucratic, is to just kind of have like checklists and orderly ways of conducting things to ensure quality. And this will help you in growing your team, because at the beginning, the founders are really just doing everything, and it's a small group, and they're talking together, and they have this culture of their own. But then once it's time to hire other people, you need to have human resources processes, and professionals do it. You need to make sure that new people kind of get the memo about how things are done. So the purpose of thinking about these processes is to be able to grow your team and grow your organization, and most importantly, grow your impact. And that brings us to the next segment, which is about governance. How do you ensure that the people and processes we've been talking about are protected? Let's find out in the next video.